This video is brought to you in collaboration with wowhead.com. Hello everyone! Today we're going to be talking about bits and pieces of the story from the novel War of the Scaleborn. As I've told you in my review, if you're interested in dragons or the story of Dragonflight, if you're curious about the formative years after the Aspects took care of Galagrond and became the Aspects, this book is definitely worth your time to check out, and I would never be able to tell the story as well as the book does. With that in mind, let's go over some of the things that stood out for me. The story begins sometime after Galagrond has fallen to the team-up of Keeper Tyr and are now Aspects. We already learned the major reason behind the conflict as we've played through Dragonflight.
You promised me you would not force the Titan's will upon us. But the eggs, Alexstrasza. You did nothing while your masters warped our children, still in the shell. That abhorrent act should never have happened. And I regret my part in it every day.
Which made me wonder why this book wasn't released at the start. Now, of course, there's always production lines, and you don't know what happened in the back end, but this book would have been very valuable at the beginning of the expansion rather than at the end. Now, in-game, we got some books talking about Galagrond's corruption by Alexstrasza, and Tyr messing with the life-giving waters of Azeroth, using it to infuse Dragon Eggs with the Order magics. Then we learn more from the dungeon Tyr hold and the Keeper's Vault itself, but for the longest time, we had no idea how Alexstrasza or the others looked upon the Keeper's actions. Were they even aware that this is their origin? They still call him friend after all, even though he forced order upon unborn children. Surely someone like the Lifebinder would have some problems with this. Not to say that she was completely down with what Keeper Tyr wanted, that would be wrong. But at the same time, she did know about it. And the other Aspects sanctioned it, full-blown lied about it to the world. Even up to the point where they are literally called out and like, yeah, where's your proof then? You can't prove anything. Knowing full well what they did. This would also, after centuries of trying to stay neutral, eventually push her dear friend Veritnova to become and side with the primal incarnates. One lie, one choice that pushed a lot of things in the future. Now, I will say that the reasons and the story in the book I thought were kinda clever and well used. I imagine that the choice of Order magic being the catalyst, that it was not a choice of the writer, but rather one of those story beats that had to go into the book from Blizzard's side of things, and then it's up to the author to weave it in there. So it starts with Tyr's request. Think carefully upon my words, Alexstrasza. I only wish to see you thrive. The Dragonflights must grow more quickly. Take primal dragon eggs from the wilds and infuse them with Order magic. Your flights must be prepared to defend Azeroth when the time comes. Alexstrasza had balked at the idea, especially because it had been phrased as a request. They then discuss it amongst each other and fear the repercussions should they decline Tyr's so-called request. What would happen if the Aspects defied the will of the Keepers? Would they be deprived of the blessings that had transformed their lives? Forced to return to the unenlightened existences that they'd lived before? Or would their light be snuffed out entirely, nets before the might of gods? No, Alexstrasza would not risk turning the Keeper against them, especially with Virak raising a rebellion against the Broodlands. Were that terrible future to come to pass, the Aspects would need every ally they could call upon. To soften the blow, they argued that the survival rate of primal dragons in the wilds was extremely low, and that they could take better care of them. The Titanforged were ordered to only steal abandoned eggs, but of course, if parents just fly away from the nest for a little while, the Titanforged can't call the difference. And steal them they did, out of fear of what may or may not be. And the fear of the unknown, it pushes a lot of events in the war between the Primals and the Aspects, not knowing what the other side was thinking or doing. Imagining the worst case scenarios and wanting to be prepared. The Primalists feared that the dragons were going to force them to embrace their way of life. And so we read about them gathering their forces. Iridikron especially, he will do anything he must to preserve their way of life. Scheming and plotting, spreading false rumors and attacking mortals. Funny enough, he'd already spread the rumor of the dragons stealing their children and infusing them, not knowing that it was actually the truth. In turn, fear for what was to come, it also had Neldarian do a whole bunch of things the light of day should never see. We actually played through that while exploring the Zarlek caverns and his hidden laboratory. His dragon-slaying Dragfear were one of those preemptive defenses that he came up with. which Razageth found out about, and it pushed her to do what he feared, directly attack. Her imprisonment then led to retaliation. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the Primalists are completely good and right, nor am I saying that the dragons did no wrong. There was stuff happening on both sides, some of it fueled by fear. I personally thought that the way they escalate the conflict with preemptive movements, that was rather clever, and I can't help but think back to what happened with our Raphion, his fear of the coming of the Legion. His actions to try and get the world ready to stand against it actually made the next Legion invasion happen.
The fires that once burned the sky will return. It is inevitable. The burning Legion will find Azeroth. Seas of blood, cities in ruin. Who are we? One divided world to stand against a Legion.
The connections don't stop there either, as you might remember that we were the ones who created Raphion by messing with his egg as well. Back then he told us,
"Don't look so surprised. We dragons are conscious, even within our shells. As I grew, I could hear the plotting and scheming. I was to be born a prisoner."
While our intentions might have been pure, to restore and recreate a purified Black Dragon egg to stand in the defense of Azeroth, Raphion wasn't given a choice. Now what an opportunity here for Raphion to learn about what they'd done to his egg and side with Veritnova, with the Primalist for a while, be a bridge to learn more about their side of the story, and eventually, get Veritnova on our side as we see it in-game. But sadly, that's not how the story went. They do make great use of the consciousness while still being inside of their eggs. Some of the primal, now ordered dragons, they remembered being stolen from their nests. They remember eyes in the rocks, creatures that hide there and take them away. Or sometimes they dream about how it felt to be transformed, body, mind and soul. Future generations would simply be born from dragons and have their parents and their lineage, but these were taken away from where they belonged, and they don't even have a family to call their own. There's definitely an argument to be made that the eggs wouldn't have survived in the wild anyways, but that doesn't take away that for them, choice was removed. This pushes some amongst the flight to then rebel and aid the primal incarnates during the war, and with time, as they grow older and mature, some even have a change of heart again. Others, while acknowledging that they were taken, they don't see it as a bad thing. What exactly did they lose? The right to die an early death in the wild? To have to fight and struggle for their existence? Also to have a so-called choice? Story in which one truth, one side of it does not wipe out everything else, and there's something to be said from multiple angles. Then there's the origin of the war, and I'm hoping that in-game we're going to learn more about how Alexstrasza and the others look at Tyr now. We're rebuilding the Keeper. Are we actually going to confront him on anything? We've got a scenario in which it's hinted that Alexstrasza is going to betray him. Could this be her standing up to him, standing against the path of order, make the choice that she was afraid to make back in the day? I think it would be really interesting if they would make Tyr responsible for the corruption of Galakrond. That would then put him as the source behind the dawn of the aspects, and it could place a strong connection with whatever it is that Iridikron wants from Galakrond. I also really loved how they described that this war formed them. Like the dragons were created to be guardians of the world, and their fear of outside forces attacking them made them a hostile force. At some point you read about children cackling as they take on the Jarden, and it was really cool to see how, while starting off with good intentions, the escalations slowly but surely formed them, made them more hostile, more like a warlike force. Really cool to see. With that, let's talk a little bit about our main stars of the story, the Aspects and the Primal Incarnates. The book has the opportunity to show what the Aspects were like in the very beginning, empowering them to perform the different roles, guard time, life, the dream, earth and magic. That's great and all, but nobody is good at their job right at the start. They have to grow into these roles and into their powers, which works for all of them, but Nosdormu, he remains an interesting beastie. I can really imagine that writing a character that can predict time must be incredibly difficult. Time and again, they need to nerf him down. He's the Superman of our tale, because having somebody there that can spoil the story, it doesn't really work. In this case, they've gone with the idea that the Bronze Flight needs to grow into its powers, and they can't see the future clearly, which leads to some of my favorite dialogue. At some point, they ask Nosdormu if the letter they received is the truth, to which the Bronze Aspect replies, sometimes. The gift of the High Father made him very cryptic, but also very useless. I get that you need to nerf his powers because somebody's spoiling the plot, that's fun for nobody. But at the same time, he is still charged with keeping the so-called true timeline. even in this book, they once again make mention of it. But how are you supposed to do that if you can't see what the future's going to be? How are you going to guard the true timeline if you don't know what the true timeline is? And personally, I wonder if it's not time to just let go of the idea of a true timeline, because it's very vague, it's contradictive, and just doesn't seem to work. Now for Malygos the Blue, he has some cool tricks and abilities that are used in some interesting ways, like an early version of the Hearthstone or creating illusionary armies. I do wish we would see more of that funny, humorful blue aspected love magic, the way he was described in the past. That part of his character doesn't really get a chance to shine through. Ysera does a lot of things off-screen and is mainly used to support her sister Alexstrasza, who definitely has one of the bigger roles in the story. It's interesting how in-game the Queen has so little story to talk about and just kinda keeps things together. Here in this book, you really get an insight on how it wasn't order magic that transformed her, but rather a duty to her people. After watching centuries of primalist cruelty, I do not regret saving those whelps from the wilds. You mourn those eggs, Veritnova, yet in the same breath you march on the broodlands to slaughter the drakes they become. Who then is the monster? Ever have I fought to protect life. Ever have I sued for peace, but you will not relent. Therefore, I will defend my flights by wing and by talon. There are moments in which he simply lost at the idea of mortals being useful. Early mortals, which, as I read the description, I have to assume they were trolls, to then embrace these mortals, work together towards the potentials foreseen by Nosdormu. The trolls would eventually spread out, as we know, they would play their parts, and of course some of them evolve into the elves, who would then stand with the aspects during the War of the Ancients. This is also what motivated them to create visages, to make it easier to communicate with the mortals. And this was such a neat trick that not only did the primal incarnates steal that idea, it also gave Alexstrasza the edge she needed in a 1v1 fight with Veritnova. The motif of mortal lives actually playing a critical role in the life of dragons, that's something that would echo on for millennia. Just think back to the role that Thrall played back with the Cataclysm, and it was cool to read how some of those early steps developed, stumbles and pitfalls included. And then our last aspect, the other one that got a lot of time in the story, that was Neldarian, or Deathwing as we would get to know him better as. I love that they remembered that even as a primal dragon, Neldarian could hear the whispers of the old gods, as they described in Dawn of the Aspects. As the Earth Warder, those whispers from the 4 old gods, which is the number in this book, they're assaulting him constantly. Over the years, they had increased in intensity, making Neldarian question his own thoughts, his own actions. They were inescapable, omnipresent. Neldarian had not told another soul about them, not even Malygos, who had long been his closest confidant and friend. They made him feel small and insignificant, crawling like a whelp in his chamber as they assaulted him from the dark. One thing that blew me away was how in this moment, the old gods are constantly tearing him down. He has quite a brilliant strategic mind, one that goes head to head on the warboard against Iridikron. He plans for futures that do come to pass centuries later. All the while, there are voices in the back of his mind just going, "You're not good enough, you're not strong enough, you're going to fail. Embrace our power, and we'll let you accomplish your wildest dreams." Compare that to how they whispered to him during the War of the Ancients. By that time, they were cheering him on. "You are the greatest. The others will only betray you. They will hold you back. You should be the leader of all dragons with us at your side." Right now, they're tearing him down until he inevitably embraces their powers for the greater good, as he would write it off, keeping the darkness and secrets to himself. Once they've fully torn him down, at some point in the future, they'll start feeding his ego, and I really like that dynamic. Of course, embracing the powers of the old gods, it's not the only thing that he does for the so-called greater good. There's also the development of the Dragsphere, which did not go without horrific experiments. You've probably played through it, if not seen the video around Aberus. Those things happen here as well, and it's interesting what you're willing to do when you're thinking that you're working out of a spot of righteousness. And again, there are parallels to be drawn to Rephion. Rephion was a proper Earth Warder, a true black dragon uncorrupt by the old gods. He would do anything and everything it took to take care of Azeroth, to defend her, to uphold his charge.
Dragons. I suppose I deserved that.
As I said, Neldarian goes head-to-head with our boy Iridikron. Both of them are connected to the element of Earth. Both of them are schemers, planners, whatever you want to call them, with different views and different goals. Where the aspects were empowered with order through Keeper Tyr, The primal incarnates found a way to something, and not even the book fully explains what they found, which makes me hope that it's something for the future to be revealed within the game. Iridacron's main base of Harrow's Deep is also not in the game as far as I know, and I'd imagine that someone like him would position himself nice and close to the power source. A power source, which interestingly enough was not discovered by Iridacron, it was actually Firak who found it first. He was the first one who managed to go through whatever they had to do to become the powerful incarnates. It's a ritual, it's an absorption of power with a high mortality rate. We know that much. We know that not everybody can just become an incarnate, but the where and the what and all the details, they're still very much hidden. So Firak found it first, and then led Iridacron there to follow in his footsteps. Then the Earth kinda takes over from Fire with his big brain and his big plans. Again, very much motivated by the idea of not wanting to embrace the orderly way of life. I did wonder about a potential Old God influence. If Iridacron is a mirror to Neldarian, how come we don't read about him struggling with the whispers of the void? The story takes us into his mind as well, but there's no mention of the whispers. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not there, of course, but he didn't use any of the darkness. Fast forward to current day, and we see him traveling through void portals, potentially hanging out with Zolotov. When exactly did that connection build up? How much did the old gods influence these events, the War of the Scaleborn? In the realm of speculation, we currently have the information that Yogg-Saron caused Galagrond to happen. In reply, we see Tyr team up with the future dragon aspects, and the story of Warcraft plays out. The old gods tried to break out of the prisons with the Cataclysm, and we got a glimpse of what they would look like if they succeeded. They had no real love for Deathwing, he was just a means to an end. Did they plant any seeds for the future with influence in this war influencing Iridacron? If so, will his dealings ultimately lead us into more of a void story? Or is he now more of a free agent, considering Azeroth is cleansed? Things to be revealed in the future, I suppose, in correlation to the mention of his dark dealings that Alexstrasza had. If I line it up with what happens in the book, the dark dealings to keep the war going, that was his allegiance to the Jardin, which, if the other incarnates knew about, like Jardin are dragon killers, they probably wouldn't be too happy about it. So, yeah, it was his dealings with the Jardin, as far as I can make out of this book. Then Razageth, she was the third to be accepted amongst the ranks, and for a while it was just them three. There's mention here and there about them being cousins or clutch mates with some of the aspects, like Firak, who taught Alexstrasza how to fight when they were still primal dragons. There's a connection there, which is why they imprisoned the incarnates rather than just take them out. Razageth embraced the aspect of the storm, whereas Firak, he has the fiery flame temperament, and Iridacron, he has the calm collection of the earth. But don't underestimate what's hidden beneath the surface. Throughout the war, more are recruited to their side. The origin of the Primalist, right? More that don't want to follow the aspects and their vision of the world. Nasty rumors were spread, like the aspects would force order upon them, murder innocents, they would steal their children. Little did Iridacron know that that little rumor was actually true. They would use Razageth and a defective black dragon to assault villages and make it look like the black Dragonflight was on the attack. All kinds of nasty games were played here, actions that then got reactions. War was brewing, but through it all, Veritnova had still not chosen any sides. She just couldn't understand why her beloved Alexstrasza would side with Keeper Tyr and Order. Their new city, their new words, their orderly way of life. It was all not for her, but still, she loved Alexstrasza. They had defended clutches together and trusted her when the queen flat out lied and told Veritnova that they wouldn't take X. They wouldn't force order upon them. Many years passed, and the book makes full use of this big unknown time period and dragonkind being so long-lived, as it uses big sections, right? Like 50 years pass, a century passes, 200 years. They let big patches of time come and go. Years of loneliness for Veritnova, as she's lost her own kind. Alexstrasza was now busy being the queen. Wouldn't you know it, there is Razageth showing up and offering friendship. Thrilling ride through the storms, the primal elements. Razageth had a way of quickly making friends all over the world. The Storm Eater is quite chaotic in her nature, so when she discovers the Dragfear, she immediately strikes out. The Legacy episode that shows this moment, it gave me the impression that they were in the middle of the war, right? But that's not the case. She accidentally discovered Neldarian's new units, and she took her forces to take care of business. She nearly won as well. Our brilliant tactician could not believe that she managed to figure out to go for his Thanos glove, but she had, and with control lost, the voices pushed him into embracing their powers, overwhelming the primal incarnates and trapping her within the mountain. This did leave him with a whole bunch of highly trained dragon killers that he could no longer fully control, and they knew about his secrets, his dealings with the Void. Now others, he trusted for them to keep his secrets, but not the Dragfear. They were locked away and placed in magical slumber. News of Razageth's imprisonment quickly spreads, and it pushes the war from its cold state into, okay, we're gonna go at it now, for Razageth and for the eggs that were stolen, as Titanforge had uncovered stealing their children. Veritnova finally accepts Iridikron's request and joins them as a primal incarnate. Surviving the ritual, she becomes an incredibly powerful ally, not just because she embodies the power of ice, but also because of how much it would wound Alexstrasza. I do think, knowing now how much Razageth meant to them, that their reaction in the cutscene, it's kinda underselling.
Sister, what have they done to you?
Veritnova went through a horrific, deadly ritual to try and save her sister Razageth. The others were pissed off at the aspects for trying to convert them, and now seeing their sister dead on the floor. Yeah, the reaction, it was a bit mellow. It doesn't compare to how the story describes the connection within the books. Seeing how long I've been rambling already, we're not going to go into all the details of the many battles that play out. If you want to read out the war, then definitely pick up the book. What I can tell you is that after Razageth loses, because Neldarian cheats, we get on to Firak. Malygos pretends to be Alexstrasza and teleports him to their constructed prison, which is the Vault of the Incarnates. Veritnova then ends up in a 1v1 with Alexstrasza, and while the powers granted them by the Titans allowed her to stand up to the Primal's might, it wouldn't be the thing that gave her victory. Instead, it was her heart, as well as, some clever use of her visage that would give her the upper hand. The heart of the Dragon Queen. She was powerful before their empowerment, and there was a reason why she was picked to be their queen. That left Iridikron, who had spent centuries upon centuries gathering power in his lair. Neldarian is separated in the tunnels for another 1v1 confrontation. Earth versus Earth. And Iridikron, he has some power up his sleeve. "You are weak," the whisper said. In defiance of the voices in his head, Neldarian pushed himself back to his feet. His joints trembled. After centuries as the Earth Warder, he had grown accustomed to bearing the weight of the world on his back, but this force took that burden and increased it exponentially. His bones creaked, threatening to snap. Capillaries burst in the whites of his eyes. Every muscle in his body trembled. The stone-scaled cocked his head and watched the black aspect with great interest. "No one is stronger than Azeroth itself," he said softly. Neldarian could only glare at the incarnate. "Lies," the whisper said. "We are stronger." And they definitely are, as Neldarian once again unleashed the powers of the Void and knocks out Iridikron. That's how the incarnates were defeated. And honestly, it was a bit of a shame to see this century-long conflict just sizzled out by cheating, by embracing the powers of the Void. I do wonder if those whispers actually nerfed Neldarian, but that's anybody's guess. Now, it also leaves my overall questions, which has to do with shining a darker light on the Titans and the motivation, right? Without the Titans' influence on Azeroth, the world, it would still be stuck in the days of the Black Empire. Powers like the Void, powers that single-handedly take out the Incarnates, it would still be ruling the planet and keeping the Elemental Lords enslaved. There's definitely an argument to be made about who still remembers the days of the Black Empire, and enforcing the will of order too far is not a good thing either. But how far can you take this point of view? I really wonder. Stories for the future, I suppose. So yeah, the major questions that I've left after this book, besides how all of this history was covered up, but that's because, they only recently came up with this story. Besides that, I'm curious where, how, why, what exactly went down to get the Primal Incarnates going. And considering the next patch is going to deal with Firak, the first one who got there, I'm hoping we're going to get some answers. My second question, that is, what's up with Iridikron? How did he get in touch with the Void, with Xal'atath, with those Void portals? What is he planning in the background while we deal with Firak? What does he want with Caligrand? All that spoilery good stuff. Seeing how much of a planner and a schemer he was in the book, I'm really hoping it's going to play out in-game as well. Time is hopefully going to tell. But for now, thank you very much for watching, everyone. I really wish I could keep on rambling here, but we gotta wrap up the video at some point. And like I said, if you're curious about details, because I haven't even talked about the units and the new characters and how the battles played out and all the good stuff, check out the book if you want it. Say that you want more details on all the things that we talked about today, or just read it up on in your own time. Check out the related WoW article in the description down below. And as always, subscribe if you like my videos, leave a like if you enjoyed this one, and until next time, see ya!